and it just rebooted. So while it's doing that, hey, welcome Tennessee, Boston, Maryland, Massachusetts. Excellent. If you're just joining us, let us know where you're joining from because we love to know what time zones we're talking to and who we're helping. And oh, it looks like the Facebook thing worked. Is it working? Yeah, okay.
I've seen someone coming through from Iceland here, which is very exciting. I'm not so sure I've seen anyone from Iceland in our program. So
That's fantastic.
welcome to our community.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Hello, Aurelia. Boston Strong again. Colleen, hey, good to see you. Okay, cool. So because a lot of people will be joining on the recording also, Santa Barbara, California, I'm not going to spend 5 minutes just welcoming people and waiting for more people to come on because that's really boring for those of you who showed up, right? We're going to go right into it and you can catch the recording if you missed the beginning. Because we have a lot to cover, and to respect your time, we want to try to keep this to an hour this week. So I will ask your indulgence towards the end because we're going to tell you about the courses that we have on offer with a deadline of tomorrow to sign up, but that's for later. Right now, let's chat. So we have a lot of great questions, Dr. Roberts, that we're going to be addressing. But let's address the direction that we're taking this, because this isn't just going to be all COVID all the time, right? What's the direction of our conversation this week?
Well, when you asked me this, Louis, and I thought, the honest truth is we're all fed up to death with COVID. We would like to go back to normal life. We can't go back to normal life. So this is our normal life. And, rather than, we certainly need to wring our hands a bit about COVID and how to stay safe and all of that. But I also want to talk about the resiliency of the human spirit and, how we're stronger than we think we are, and how even if we have terrible crises to deal with now, if we use that resiliency, we can do a bit better than we otherwise would. And I realize I'm speaking as a really privileged person. I've kept my job. My family is all safe in my house. We have food in the pantry. And there's people who've lost loved ones, people who are struggling to put food on the table because they've lost their jobs. Everyone's situation is really different. I think we need to respect that, there's some people who really are struggling, and we should be trying to help as many people in our community as we can. But we also shouldn't, belittle the problems of people who look like on the surface they have it all, because people are starting to lose loved ones. They're starting to, have to say goodbye to people over the phone that they never thought that they would have to do that too. So, I think everyone is in this together, and everyone is challenged in different ways. So it's new life, not just COVID, I think.
Yeah, that's really important to say. We're speaking to a lot of people now, and we're providing a recording of this. And this is about weight, right? It's about health, and it's about weight, because that's what we do at iDiet, right? So we're largely addressing people who have, I don't even want to say the luxury, right? But it's an option to overeat. And there's time and space in your life. You're probably not a frontline worker, but if you are, thank you so much. So that's the frame around this conversation, because we need a frame and a lens through which to focus our comments. Otherwise, we can't be, broadly helpful. And something, on the lemons to lemonade topic, which I think you're really touching on here, something that I've noticed working with you and spending time with you, Dr. Roberts, is you're remarkably good at making lemonade. I think you're sort of on the far end of the spectrum of being able to see challenges as opportunities and see problems as things to be solved. It's what you're doing with obesity, right? You're trying to solve the global obesity problem, not just roll over and say, woe was me. So, I've learned a lot from you personally the time that I've spent with you in iDiet, in just, sort of learning how to take on that attitude of, here's the challenge. How am I going to creatively address it? What am I going to learn from it? How will I proceed and come out the better for it? Instead of, woe is me and rolling over and feeling the victim, right? So I had to say that because it's true. But I know you wanted to speak a little bit more about this lemons to lemonade topic. Yes?
Oh, well, I mean, yes, I absolutely believe that whatever our life tragedy we have, we can confront it, and through that confrontation, we can do better than we might have done otherwise. I mean, that's not to say we don't ever make mistakes. I mean, I've had some major things in my life. I broke my knee skiing, about 30 years ago. And at the time, I was just so irritated because it was a horrible local ski run. And I was planning to go to Colorado in 3 weeks for the ski trip of a lifetime. And I just couldn't think of anything worse than missing this Colorado trip. But there were complications that, there often are with knees. And I ended up spending 1 year on crutches and another 2 years on a cane before I could walk normally.
Oh my
And
goodness. I
yeah,
didn't know this.
it was a long time. Yeah, yeah. I was a young woman who walked with a cane. Um, and there were some days when I was pretty dysfunctional about that. But over time, I adapted. And, can I say I was unhappy or unbalanced for all of that time? No, I can't. I think all of us have got some strength that, if we're pushed into a corner, if we use that strength, we can come out a bit better.
You
And I
probably
got,
did a
and
lot more.
I got
Sorry,
my
go ahead.
knee back.
You did. Yeah. Yeah. And you probably spent a lot of time reading and learning and, being productive.
I spent a lot of time in physical therapy mainly. I did 3 years of physical therapy. Um, that was an absolute lifeline. I think physical therapists are an amazing group of people. I would be in a wheelchair today actually without them.
Mm. Yeah. Talk about learning resilience also, is
Yeah,
talk to a physical therapist because they've seen it.
yeah.
Yeah. Really good point. Okay. So we're talking about strength here. How do we use that? How can we focus some of that on our health now? Um, I presume most people here are cooking more. And actually, this would be a great thing to chime in on the chat. So participants, are you cooking more? Are you ordering out? Are you eating frozen? Like, what is your relationship to food now? Because that's what we want to talk about right now. So how do you cook more if you can't get everything that you wanted on your list? If something was out, or is cooking overstimulating you? Like, is there too much food in the house because you're making batches? And let us know. We want to address these things. But what would you say about being creative in the kitchen, Dr. Roberts?
Well, so everybody I talk to, they're cooking more. I think that, maybe there's a few people who are continuing to do takeout just as often as they did, but most people are cooking more. And the supply chain is continuing to be very disrupted. And many of us are trying to shop less frequently to reduce the risk of infection. So I think all of that means, yes, you run out of stuff. We've certainly run out of stuff in my house. And, my mantra here is, it's an adventure, we can be creative. Last night is a good example, actually. I was planning a Chinese stir fry and I had this package of tofu in the fridge and I brought out a package of mixed vegetables. And I've got this all in my planned out. I had brown basmati rice, I had everything. And then I looked at the frozen vegetable package and I thought, my family's going to shout at me. This is horrible. There's just not enough vegetables. And my family is big on vegetables. And so I went back into the freezer. There was no more mixed vegetables. And I just ended up pulling out a large amount of frozen peas and adding them. And I've personally never had frozen peas in any stir fry I've ever had in Chinatown. Um, but we had the stir fry and it had a lot of peas in it and everybody gobbled it up. It was great. So, for me, I'm making these decisions every day. If you don't have one vegetable, you use another. Another problem I've personally been having is getting whole wheat flour. And I will say I've been extremely unsuccessful at that. I've ordered whole wheat flour on Amazon, which didn't come. I've ordered whole wheat flour from Instacart that didn't come. And I love making bread. It's a healthy, delicious thing. You've got time, you're stuck at home for the rising of the bread. I mean, it's just a great thing to do. But what can you do when you can't get flour? So actually recently I went onto Amazon and I said, I'm going to make this work. And I ordered white flour, I ordered wheat bran, I ordered wheat germ, I ordered gluten, and I ordered wheat berries. And so I'm reconstituting my whole wheat flour that way, and it's fine. And it costs a lot less than the whole wheat flour. It's not quite true to say you can't get it, but if you look on Amazon today, the whole wheat flour that you can get is like 3 times the cost of what it should be. And I refuse to be scammed on this. It just feels morally wrong in this time. So, but I put everything together at a reasonable price, and it's another adaptation that we've had to make. For every recipe, there's another way to do it. And sometimes it's almost as good. Sometimes it's even better. Sometimes you make a change and it's different and it's more variety and you think, wow. And I think all of us for having to do these steps are going to come out better cooks, because really that's what cooking is all about, is taking a basic recipe and then over time making it your own. So we're like being forced into becoming great chefs. And that's, going to be one very nice thing that comes out of this terrible time.
Yeah, happy accidents in the kitchen, right?
Just
I
as
love
long as you don't burn it.
yeah, right. I love the British stir fry with peas. Like peas sound to me like a very British, um, like the original British vegetable. Like whenever I go there, like peas were on every menu everywhere I went, right? Um, One thing we've addressed this also in on track, talking about substitutions, etc. And just a great general technique is you think, okay, what food category is the thing? So they're out of something. What category of food is this thing that they're out of? So I'll go up a level in the category and then over. So is it a green thing? Is it a root thing? Is it a fiber thing? Is it a protein thing? There are lots of other proteins that you can get and substitute into a recipe. And the
Mhm.
same thing with like a leafy green or a bulky green. Maybe they have, see what else is in the frozen section, or, and then get creative and see what happens and be willing to see what happens rather than pedantic about it and say, no, it must be this, right? Be willing to be surprised.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to look at it. I mean, you're painting this like an adventure too, and it really is in a sense. I mean, I think recipes, they're important because they give you a starting point, but every kind of serious chef I know makes many adaptations to recipes, and we have like an enforced opportunity, if that doesn't sound too silly, to become expert at that in our own kitchen now. And that's a great thing.
Yeah, when you watch cooking shows or you watch any professional chef, they're presenting a perfect, it's been edited, it's been rehearsed, and they've probably made that recipe 20 times getting it right. Like I know some of the people at America's Test Kitchen, they make those recipes many, many, many times, so many variations, and then they present you with the perfect thing. And then we end up getting left with this idea that, like, if I don't make it perfectly the first time, I'm a terrible chef. I
Yeah,
can't cook. But cooking is all about experimentation and learning from what you've done.
that's right. That's right. And I think the ideal. I mean, as a recipe developer, I think the ideal in recipe development is to have very resilient recipes. I mean, I certainly, that was I would say one of my major priorities when we were making the recipes in the iDiet book, is that, if you leave it in the oven too long, if if you're not very good at measuring out the ingredients exactly and things like that, is it still going to work? And is it still going to taste good? So,
Yes.
if you're working from a recipe book where, unless you do everything 100% right, the recipe is a failure, you could throw that book out. I mean, it's not a good basis for cooking in the long term.
And how many of you in attendance here have had a cookbook like that, right? Let us know in the chat, because I know I certainly have, where I look at a recipe and I'm like, how is this even supposed to work? Sometimes they don't edit these books very well either. There's not a lot of recipe testing. So yeah, you want go-to recipes that you can customize and get really comfortable with them and swap different things in and out, and you'll be much happier. But again, anti-perfectionism is, I think, the rule here.
That's a great term. Something I would love to do, and I just don't have time to do it right now, is to define about 20 core ingredients and make a whole recipe book with just those ingredients, because it really irks me when you go to a new recipe book and you have to buy 10 new things just to make one dish. And I mean, it's a terrible thing, which frankly isn't even feasible in the situation we're in right now.
Oh, that's a brilliant idea. I think that's your second iDiet book right there.
When I have time.
Well, yeah, I know you're working on a lot of research projects right now also. So
any research projects.
But that would be awesome. In the comments, I'm also seeing some takeout, and I know some restaurateurs, and I know how much they appreciate when people do order takeout in this time, because the restaurants are really struggling. They're always on a knife edge of profitability, even in good times. So this is really hard for them. And we should mention that this is actually a great time, or takeout is a great way to experience restaurant food if you're an iDieter or you're trying to watch your weight, because you walk into a restaurant, you're stimulated by the smells, you're maybe over hungry by waiting in line or waiting for the table or being in traffic. There are all these other people eating, so all of Dr. Roberts' food instincts are triggering you, right? Availability, variety, familiarity, calorie density, all these things, and you're hungry. So there you go, all 5 right there. You're in the restaurant, you're overstimulated, and you're looking at a menu and there are all these options. As we teach you, you decide before you walk in the restaurant, and that helps. But if you decide when you're at home and you're safe and you can control your hunger level and you can look at the online menu and choose the healthiest option, or choose substitutions to make it an even healthier option, or decide, like, I'm going to take this meal and mix it with frozen vegetables and extend it and reduce the calories per serving, then you're helping out a restaurant, and you're making your cooking easier, and you're exerting self-control. You're practicing that sort of like logical thinking and pre-planning about what the restaurant food is. And so it's win-win-win.
That's a great way to look at it. And you can also order the right number of dishes for how big your family is. I mean, when you're sitting in a restaurant, it's hard not to order like 4 main courses, because that's what seems appropriate. But truly speaking, two main courses goes for 4 people, with plenty of calories to spare.
Yes.
So you be really careful like that way too.
Right. When you're sitting at the table, everybody has to order something. But when you're at home, you can get half as much and split, and you don't have to apologize to the wait staff about that.
Right.
That's a really good point. Okay, so switching gears a little bit, the next question is related to current times, right? There's a lot of stress eating. We're hearing about a lot of stress eating. We're hearing about emotional eating. We're hearing about eating for comfort. And we're hearing about eating when I'm not even really hungry. Like I've finished my day's food and then it's after dinner and I continue to eat. I'm binge watching something and I'm maybe binge eating too, or just I can't stop, right? And you could even be watching yourself reach for the food and thinking like, why am I doing this? I'm not hungry, but you're still doing it, right? We hear this a lot. And I'd love to hear from people in the chat, like, are you finding your at-home time easier to control, harder to control? Like, what's changed for you? I'd love to hear that in the chat area. And if you're on mobile devices, it's a little hard to find the chat, but it's going to be, if you see nothing, tap your screen once and some controls will pop up, and one of them will be chat with a little bubble. And if you're on a laptop or a desktop, it'll be easier. But we'd love to hear from you in the chat. Okay, so sorry about that. And also, if you're watching in the simulcast on Facebook, I'm sorry, but because we're pushing to Facebook, we can't see your reactions. So we'll check afterwards. But the people in the Zoom are going to get the best of our attention. Okay, over to you, Dr. Roberts.
Well, I think that these are the best of times when it comes to having options for that kind of control. And I realize that might sound upside down on the face of it, but, if you think about it, many of us are ordering on Instacart or Amazon Fresh today. We're not going into the supermarket, or if we are going into the supermarket, we're making a list because we don't want to just saunter slowly around. We want to get in and out without wasting any time. So you have a list. And that's that planning and ordering in advance is exactly what you need to prevent the unhealthy stuff coming into the house. So we've got a very good system. If we use that to say we're not going to have any unhealthy food in the house, that's really going to reduce the opportunities and the temptation that you have in the house. It's not the whole story, but it's certainly a huge help. And you can exploit that. And if you have family members who really want, cookies or ice cream that you really don't want to be tempted by, see if you can negotiate with them to have a brand or a flavor that just leaves you cold, so that it's in the house, but it's not something that tempts you. But then there's the problem of the healthy things in your house that you're tempted to overeat. And I'm thinking nuts, dark chocolate, those are healthy things. Red wine, I would put that in that category. And we all have to make a decision about what works for us and what we can control there. For me, I will say I've given up dark chocolate for the COVID duration. And, I don't know why. It just felt like the right thing to do, because I was worried it was going to be a slippery slope. Nuts, on the other hand, I've discovered that they freeze really well, and you can portion control your nuts. You can stick them in the freezer. They don't microwave too well, so you have to bring them out in a thoughtful way. So there's things that I'm portion controlling that are very high in calories that otherwise I would just be reaching in and grabbing. And I'm surely in the groups you can discuss strategies and brainstorm with people for other kinds of foods on that. But I do think that this can be a really good time for those things. It doesn't have to be a negative.
Yeah, good point. And speaking of the groups in On Track Plus, we're right now in the middle of a series on resilience and emotional IQ. So we just this week started a process of looking at the sort of the negative voices in your head and how to negotiate with them, and how to be able to track how your mood affects your eating and how to recover from those spirals. So if you're an iDiet graduate, I'd encourage you to check that out. I think, tailing onto what you're saying, you can also look at it not as a failure, but as a clue, right? So if you are reaching for these foods, what is it telling you? It's evidence. It's just like we say, weigh yourself every day, because it's data. It's not a way to beat yourself up. It's a way to gather data to use to make better decisions.
Uh-huh.
So if you are eating in response to an event, think like, all right, I'm eating, what just happened? Was I watching the news? Was I arguing with someone in my house? Was I on social media and people were saying things? Is it an emotional reaction like that? Or am I missing, or is it something I've always done? Is it the food that I want from childhood? And so am I feeding my inner child? And then just compassionately, maybe dispassionately, but definitely compassionately notice that, and then decide what you're going to do about it. The sum total of human knowledge is available on the internet. Somebody's probably blogged about this, so you can read about this also. But I would encourage anyone who's going through this to not think of it as a failure, but think of it as information, data, and, like we were saying earlier, an opportunity to learn and improve. It's a signal. What do you do with that signal? You can just beat yourself up, but then you're just going to eat more, right? You know,
Those are great points. And, let's not neglect, the traditional iDiet strategies too. I mean, things like having one square of melted dark chocolate over a large bowl of fiber in the evening. It's hard to feel very tempted after something like that. I mean, that's a really great way to stop after dinner eating that, people have been using in iDiet for years, and we shouldn't give those things up now.
yeah, that's a really good point to make, is that a vacuum must be filled. Like if you just say like, well, I'm never going to have sweets again, I'm never going to have dessert again, that's going to leave a big hole in your life and in your feelings that's going to want to be filled with something. So if we fill it with one of Dr. Roberts' amazing fiber-full desserts, then you get your treat and you feel full and it's all good. You know, it's when you go to the stuff that's not legal that you can really get into trouble, because then you end up chasing a sugar high and you can never catch a sugar high, because insulin just takes over.
I checked Amazon today for Fiber One Original, and I was sorry to see that it's still hard to get. But you can very easily get Kellogg's Old Man Original on Amazon. So there are very easy sources of high fiber out there for these desserts.
Yeah, we should mention, I don't know if we talked about this last time, that Fiber One just did a big brand redesign, and they added some new products, and they sort of relaunched their brand. And right at the time that they were doing this, and they were trying to use up all the old stuff and get the new packaging into the stores and do a big launch, this whole COVID-19 thing hit. And so the supply chain's a bit interrupted, but they have not discontinued it. It will be back in stores. The packaging will be very pretty. Oh yeah, and I'm seeing in the chat, like people are overcharging for Fiber One on Amazon, the delivery services. Yeah, yeah,
It's driving me nuts. This price scamming on healthy food should not be happening. But so I think all we can do is either be willing to be scammed, which I'm personally not, or looking for the alternatives that are also good. Also good.
yeah,
I mean, I personally think All Bran is a great alternative to Fiber One Original.
yeah, yeah. It's there are other options. You know, we have a blog about it. I think it's the eight. Our blog is called the eight best cereals for weight control, and we list all the brands there. You can find it in our blog.
Yeah.
Um, you know, you're reminding me of something else when you were talking about bread baking. Something that's kind of new now is the restaurants that are still delivering. Some of them are dividing up their 50-pound sacks of flour into 2 and 5 pound packages that you can buy as part of your food delivery. So, because it's not like there's no flour in the world. It's that the cute little packages that are shipped to grocery stores are getting sold out. But there's a lot of large service-sized foods in the world that aren't packaged for retail sale. And some of those are going to waste, and some of them are being creatively repackaged or going to food pantries. So you can check with, in your local area, any restaurant that did, you think, bake its own stuff. Call them and see if they're selling some of their supplies for home cooking, because some of them are. Even yeast, because they get yeast in great big containers as well, not the cute little jars that we get in the store.
You've inspired me. I'm going to go for another hunt around to get some flour.
Yeah, yeah. If there are like bakery cafes in your area,
Yeah.
see if they're doing that, because it's another way for them to help the community and keep some people employed as well. I'm going to skip. Let's come back to food safety for a sec, because I think we're on a roll with emotions here. And we had a question about just feeling low mood or depression and wanting to eat well, but not wanting to put a lot of effort into it because you don't have the energy. You're feeling depressed, you're under a lot of stress, there's a lot going on. Um, let's talk a bit about how do you do the minimum for the maximum and still stay on track?
So Lee, I think it would be good if you shared our list of no cook options. We've got this list, a great list actually, of frozen meals that are iDiet legal, or frozen meals that are almost iDiet legal, and you can add some frozen veggies on the side the bars that are iDiet legal, the cereals, and just you can go with a completely non-cook set of iDiet legal food that you just microwave and nothing more is required. So, that's a great way to go if you hate cooking or you're feeling depressed and you just need an easy time without not too much food preparation in the kitchen.
Yeah, you can outsource your cooking quite a bit. Um,
Yeah.
Now, I don't have a way to know only who is attending today to send you this list. Um, so I think, if anybody's looking for resources and you list, just email Lee at theidiet.com, literally Lee at THEIdiet, you see right there, .com. And I can send you the resources that we're talking about. We can also blast this out to the entire list of all our subscribers. Um, and you should know that the list of frozen foods that we're talking about is not an absolutely complete list of all frozen foods. It's a subset because the grocery industry changes all the time. They're introducing new stuff, they're discontinuing old stuff. We don't know what's regionally available, etc. But it gives you a sense, right? And then you can also use the iDiet legal formula, looking at the nutrition label on the frozen entrees. And like Dr. Roberts says, you always want to add more vegetables. They can't pack enough vegetables into those little boxes. So buy extra frozen veggies, buy extra broccoli, spinach, cauliflower, mixes, and zap that as well for extra fullness and extra nutrition. And you can eat very well if you get your vitamins from veggies, and fruit, etc.
No,
One comment.
another thing you can do is think about having a really kind of limited a variety of things that you enjoy. I mean, if you're happy with the same breakfast every day, which many people are, and the same lunch, just order enough on Instacart for 2 or 3 weeks of breakfast, snacks, um, lunches, so they're always the same. You always know what you're going to eat. You know that you enjoy that. And then switch it up for dinner and have a few different choices for dinner. But to the extent that you can have a reduced variety of food, that will also make it a much more, there's fewer decisions, but you're going to enjoy it even so.
That's a really good point. It ties in one of the previous questions about emotional eating, stress eating, sort of going off the rails. We think we're so smart, and we are because we're humans and we have a prefrontal cortex, right? There's more in our brain than just the brain stem, right? But we make a lot of emotional decisions from the brain stem, and a lot of these food decisions are from childhood, they're from habit, and as we teach you, habits run below conscious control, emotions run below conscious control, and they bubble up, and we make these decisions. So part of that is going for comfort. What's comforting? What's comforting is what's familiar. And that's why we teach you to repeat iDiet foods until they become familiar and they become comforting. So it does take an exertion of will to make these new foods familiar. But once they do become familiar, then they're the comforting foods.
That's right.
And that's what you reach for. And that's what Dr. Roberts is pointing to here. Like, I don't even remember what I used to make for breakfast because now I make my iDiet oatmeal breakfast and I absolutely love it and I look forward to it. And that's what we want, right? You want to get to the point where the food you desire is the food that's best for you. It takes a little effort at first, and then it becomes what makes me happy. That's where we want to get happy, right?
2 weeks. I think I mean, new habits do take quite a long time to fully cement themselves in your brain, and I like to say that's a 63-day job. But I think in reality the first 2 weeks is where most of the change happens. If you really stick to a very good, healthy, regimented schedule for 2 weeks, by the end of 2 weeks you find that you're positively looking forward to that meal. It's really not a long process.
Yeah. And the trick, I think, to really making that work, it's not just practicing the habit, but it's being willing to become that person. It's a shift in identity too. We talk a lot about habit change in iDiet, and you have to acquire the knowledge and do the actions to build the habits. And then over time, those habits change your identity. You become the kind of person who likes a lot of veggies with dinner, and the kind of person who turns down seconds, and the kind of person who doesn't go down the snack aisle at all, and who scoffs at junk food and things like that. And so I think it also requires a willingness to embrace those changes in your identity, because when people do revert back to old behavior, it's because there's something about that old behavior that still has a pull. Part of that is identity, I think. And so being willing to become that new person and to look forward to and embrace it can give you some extra fuel, I think, to help with that. Because, sometimes we get questions from people who are like, I was really motivated and now I'm losing my motivation, and what's going on? Is there anything else? What does that make you think of?
I think, motivation comes and goes. Motivation's a hard thing because when you start to lose weight, oftentimes you've gained weight, so you're in a big panic about really losing control and things getting worse. Maybe you've got some medical problems on top of that. So you have an enormously strong motivation coming into a weight loss program. And then you lose 10 or 20 pounds. You feel a bit more under control. Those medical problems die down a bit. And, bingo, your motivation goes down too. And there's other things going on, which is that if this is 2 years down the road from when you started, you're a person who's 2 years older, and calorie requirements do go down quite rapidly with age. So you actually need fewer calories now than you did 2 years ago. And that's not a pretty message, but it's the science. And so I think we need to, just be very clear that it's all about calories in, calories out, and how our energy requirements change as we grow older. And then you need to work out what you can eat to feel hungry, hunger-free, and satisfied at the calorie level that you are for the weight you are today and for your age. And there isn't much evidence that metabolic efficiency and metabolic adaptation is a big deal. I mean, we've in my job at Tufts University, we've been part of multi-site NIH-funded studies, and we've shown that if you lose 10% weight, on average, your calorie requirements go down by about 10%, and that's because you're a smaller person. It's not because there's this huge drop in metabolic rate. The only time that's ever been seen is in one really small study of Biggest Loser competitors, in which they did seem to have a big drop in metabolic rate that didn't recover after weight loss. And, maybe the Biggest Loser program is so extreme that it does bad things to your metabolism, but a sensible, healthy weight loss program doesn't seem to have anything like that in terms of effects. But so I think motivation and food are so interconnected that I think working out how you can get motivated for the next 10 pounds is important, certainly. And, one of my personal motivations for healthy weight management now is to think I'm going to emerge like a butterfly from a chrysalis in, I don't know whether it's 1 month or 2 months, whenever we're allowed out. And I don't want to have gained all that weight back. And so if you think about the person that you want to be when the world normalizes again, for some of us, and certainly for me, that's a pretty strong motivating factor. Or maybe it's just feeling healthier and using this strange time while we're largely at home to look after yourself for a time when you haven't been able to before. Find your motivation for that next 10 pounds. And I think that keeping a diary every night is such a great thing to do in a time like this, because you can say, how did I do today? Think ahead and think how you can do your best tomorrow, so that you've got it planned out before you go to bed, what you're going to do for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks to do your best. And I would definitely include fiber as part of that strategy because, having a very high fiber cereal with a low calorie milk twice a day for just a couple of days before you go on menus or something like that, it gives you that level of freedom from feeling unsatisfied that really boosts your motivation. So I think motivation is partly psychological, but it's also biological. If you're feeling unsatisfied because your diet has been low in fiber, the glycemic index of the carbs has been too high, there hasn't been quite enough protein, maybe your motivation's less because your hormones are all in the wrong place. But
Yes.
there's one more thing I would add, which is exercise. And I think that because we're staying home, I think any exercise that you are confident you can do safely, finding things off the YouTube or going for a walk or even exercises in your chair, but things to keep your muscles and to burn a few calories will be a great thing for your health. And, maybe it will help a bit with weight loss too. It doesn't have a big effect, but for some people, it does have a small effect.
Yeah, that's a nuanced message that we have in iDiet because we know from the studies that like if you just what is it? Is it like 1 pound a month? Like if you tell people to just exercise for an hour a day, they end up losing
Yeah.
what, 1 pound a month?
That was
Because,
that was the research. Right? We did a summary. I had one of my students at Tufts do a summary of all of the exercise intervention studies. They were just exercise, not diet, and they lost 1 pound of body fat a month if they did 1 hour a day of strenuous exercise. That was the sum of the summary of all of these studies. Now, individual people are individuals. So some people, it looked like we're doing moderately well with that exercise. Other people seem to be gaining fat. And I guess that's because they were, it was making them very hungry. So you need to listen to yourself. But I do think that some exercise to keep your muscles and to keep your cardiovascular fitness during this time is a really valuable thing for health, especially since if and when we catch this virus, we're going to need good lung capacity to see us through. And that's what, something strenuous will help with now.
yeah, if you're immobilized in the hospital, you need fitter people do better when they're immobilized in the hospital
Yeah.
because they have more excess capacity to work through. Um, yeah, it's a nuanced message because we're saying, and no, we build a half an hour of moderate intensity exercise into our plans, into our calorie plans. We assume that you're doing some basic exercise in iDiet because it's good for you and it keeps your metabolism up. We're very aware of how metabolism declines as you age, and we want to help you to slow that down as much as possible so you can eat as a reasonable amount. But if you overdo it, then you can get into trouble by overstimulating your appetite or thinking like, oh, I must have burned 500 calories. That was so hard and I'm sore. So I'm going to reward myself with something extra, right? Um, so I see a lot of people kind of falling into that trap. It really is mostly the food. I mean, even with like fitness competitors and bodybuilders, like they're like, it's, you win and lose these contests in the kitchen, is what they say. It really is true. But exercise and activity is good for health, especially because we're cooped up. We're so cooped up now. Thank goodness it's spring, right? At least now it's spring.
Oh, you're not in Massachusetts, Lee. You've just given that away with that comment. We had about 4 inches of snow in my town last night.
Oh my goodness.
4 inches. Yeah, yeah. We have what's called mashed potato in skiing terms. It's very heavy, wet snow. And if I look out of my window, even though the ground was quite warm before, we've still got about an inch left. It's New England.
Yeah, I didn't look at the news because I was prepping for our meeting today. So I'm sorry. You mentioned The Biggest Loser. I think one of the things that came up in those discussions, because I remember that study, The Biggest Loser study, um, those people were basically held hostage during production of the show. Their only with the fitness and nutrition team. They're only with the show producers. They're shuttled back to their hotel at night. They're given the food to eat. They're worked really hard. They're in this absolute pressure cooker. And if you're essentially being tortured like that, what are you going to be thinking as you're going through that? Like, oh, I can't wait to get back to my normal life so that I can have the comforts of home and not be starved and tortured this way. So you let them out of that pressure cooker, what are they going to do? They're going to, go back to their normal food, normal life, and to the environment that got them heavy in the first place. How heavy are their other family members? How heavy are their friends? What's the culture scape around them? They haven't been in that kind of situation. They were not trained to operate in a new way in the real world. They were barely managing to be in this completely artificial situation. So I think that's part of it too. It's like you have to learn how to make your choices and live in the real world with all the stimulation that's in the real world and our crappy food supply that has too many calories and is imbalanced.
Well, that's our goal, is to help people create a microenvironment that allows them to live comfortably. That's right.
Yeah, we'll learn how.
So
Okay.
Lee, you had a couple of other questions. I think one was on vitamins. I saw this one. I currently take B12, D, and omega-3. I may be missing iodine and selenium.
Yes. So we have a couple questions from plant-based eaters or people who are interested in vegetarianism or veganism. So in the chat, a few people have been reading Engine or Forks Over Knives, which I love. So we can talk broadly about like how does iDiet feel about vegetarianism? How do we feel about plant-strong eating? And the specific questions that we got around this had to do with plant oils versus omega-3s, because most plant oils are omega-6s or 9s. And then how do you make sure that you're not nutrient deficient? Like we know that vegans need to take a B12 because B12 comes through the bacteria in animals.
So I think everybody, not just people who are eating a vegetarian or vegan diet, I'm personally comfortable saying that I think a multivitamin, a really broad spectrum multivitamin, is an insurance policy for all of us. And the way I choose them personally is I go into the drugstore and I choose the one with the longest list of vitamins that has about 100% of the recommended daily dose per day. That's not exactly 100%, but not these ones who have 1,000% of this and 20% of this. That's too much micromanaging to my view. But I think a long list of things that are about 100%, that will include B12 and iodine and selenium usually, so you can get everything. You can't get the omega-3s in those, so I do think that's a separate supplement, and I think that's a good thing unless you eat, let's say, 2 servings of a fatty fish once a week, in which case you're getting plenty of omega-3s that way. So salmon and things like that. I think vegetarian and vegan eating is great. It can be extraordinarily healthy. It can also be unhealthy if you mistreat it. I mean, soda is a vegan food. I'm sure it contains sugar. Doesn't contain any meat. So you need to be mindful of of being on the healthy side. And I think if you do that, I would personally not worry about the omega-6s and the omega-9s getting those out of balance, because there's just so much evidence that especially vegan way of eating is really healthy, that maybe there's a lot of omega-6s in a vegan diet, but there's probably many other good things that kind of counterbalance that. And the science on omega-3s versus omega-6s, for example, is not what I would call mature science at this point. There's a lot we still have to know. So I think if you're doing a vegan or a vegetarian diet, do take a multivitamin the same as everybody else, and don't worry about the oil ratios, and don't forget the monosaturated oils. You know, the olive oil is a great food.
Yeah, every time I see oil studied, olive oil tends to come out on top for like safety in high temperature cooking
Yeah,
or the ratios or anything. Just make sure it's extra virgin, like make sure
yeah,
it's good olive oil and it hasn't been adulterated because that can happen. You know, and a lot of the conversation in the news about omegas and oils, it is also presupposing that you're eating a processed food diet, that you're eating the standard American diet, where there are a lot of plant oils used in processing snack foods and prepared foods and frying foods, you know, peanut oils and soybean oils and things like that. And if you're eating more along the lines that we recommend, or you're eating a whole food plant-based diet, you're not getting all those oils that have been extracted from the plants and added into the processed foods. So the ratio is a lot better in your case if you're truly eating plant foods rather than processed foods. So I would add that. You can also buy seaweed flakes and cook with them as a salt substitute for iodine. And if you're using table salt, iodized salt, you're getting enough iodine from that. If you're only buying natural salts like pink salts, etc., those do not have iodine added. And you'll want to think about iodine supplementation. But it's really hard to overdose on iodine. Um, but you know, seaweed can be a really good and interesting addition to your cooking. And you can make salad dressing. You can add a little flax oil to your salad dressing. You shouldn't cook with flax oil, but you can use that for some omegas. And you can also get ocean-derived omega-3 capsules. You know, we get our omega, like a lot of people get their omega-3s from fish oil. Where do the fish get the omega-3s? They get it from the plants that they eat. Omega-3s come from plants. So you can get vegan omega-3 supplements and take those because it really is plant derived. I think hopefully that addresses the concerns. And then, you know, there are you get enough protein from plants if you're eating a complete, if you're not being dysfunctional in your eating. Um, so the last questions, oh, we did have a food safety question, and then we had the bariatric surgery question, which I know we would both love to tear into, no pun intended. So what's the latest on, let's just talk about raw stuff, food safety. We had some specific questions about how to prepare fresh salads or bunched herbs. Like, can you still buy bunched herbs and things like that?
yeah.
What's your current thinking on that?
Well, so I read something from the WHO the other day that was saying that they were fine with raw foods. I will say I'm personally not eating salads at this time, and that's something I'm not very happy about. I'm missing salads a great deal, but I'm not doing it because I think the theoretical risks have to be there. If somebody, you know, coughs on your lettuce as they're walking past, how can that not be a fomite? So I'm not having them. I'll say that I have a good friend who has resisted my advice to not eat salads. He's eating salads regularly, and he's washing them, and he's not sick yet. So if you're willing to give up your raw foods, that's certainly safe. I would say I'm on the very prudent side by not willing to have those foods myself at this time. So it's a really individual decision.
Yeah, yeah, I'm kind of in the middle on it. Like I'm buying pre-wash, pre-packaged things, and I'm washing the outside of the package as it comes in, and then I'm re-washing what's inside. But something that's been packaged has at least been protected from exposure to people in the store. You know, you're not sure about what happened before it got into the package. So
Yeah.
there's that option also.
Mhm.
Um, and it so there's a range of responses, but there's a lot we don't know still. And I think that's where we're coming down is on, if we're going to make a recommendation to you, then we're going to err on the side of safety because we care about your safety. So we're going to err on the safe side. Yeah. So we got like 3 more questions left. Before we go into them, because I know we're coming to the end of the hour, I just want to mention that tomorrow is the deadline if you want to sign up for Engage or Advance. So Engage is our beginners class, and Advance is our class for people who've already taken Engage. And we'd also, if you're an iDiet graduate, we'd love to see you in On Track Plus, which is the new version of On Track with video meetings. Right now they're every Thursday. We've got 49 meetings in the can already, plus a few special events that we've done, and they're all recorded and available to you if you join On Track Plus, so you can binge watch as many of them as you want. And we are doing this resilience and positivity curriculum at the moment that helps with eating as well as with other things in life. So we'd love to have you there for that. And just know that tomorrow's the deadline for the classes. You can always sign up for On Track Plus, but the class is it, and we'd love to have you with us for a refresher or to begin. So thank you on that. So we had one question that came in several times during the time we were talking in the chat is intermittent fasting. And I know you have a nuanced view on this. I'd love to talk briefly about the benefits, the drawbacks, all the factors with intermittent fasting, and how do we, how would you do it in a way that's compatible with our approach?
So, as people in advance will know, we do have modules on how to do intermittent fasting in iDiet Advance. So we absolutely support it. We can be very clear that, intermittent fasting is different from time restricted eating. Those are really emerging as 2 very distinct options right now. So intermittent fasting is where you basically eat nothing or almost nothing some days a week. And time restricted eating is if you say, I'm only going to eat for, say, 8 hours during the day, and I'm not going to eat before 10 in the morning, and I'm not going to eat after 6 p.m. at night. Those are different options. I think that time restricted eating is just a clear winner, as long as it's not a really restrictive 2 hours a day or something like that. If you decided that you wanted to not eat breakfast until 10 a.m. and that you were going to finish dinner by 6 p.m. and have 16 hours a day when you didn't eat, I would not be worried at all. I would say, great, go for it. Intermittent fasting, I'm more on the fence about now than I was. We have the module in iDiet, but I would say that from a scientific perspective, I suspect that there are short-term and long-term effects of intermittent fasting. And the long-term effect is probably beneficial, that you have improvements in insulin sensitivity that may come back to improve, for example, your hunger management. So there may be metabolically beneficial effects over the long term. Whether you have beneficial effects in, the acute day-to-day effects, I somehow doubt. And I think there may be negative effects like, perhaps impaired immunity that you get acutely over 24 hours with modified fasting. And that's why I'm saying, I think, be careful with that now, because nobody needs to mess with their immunity. I'm not saying that the science is there. It's far too new a field to be able to make any categorical, statements about modified fasting at this point, but this is a concern that's hanging over my head. I would say particularly for people who are older, because they have somewhat impaired immunity in the first place. So, I think it may be helpful, but maybe not right now. Is my gut feeling.
Yeah, why put extra stress on the body at this time specifically when we have all these concerns and there's a lot of stress in the world already?
Yeah.
Um, and answers that we've given in the past, I think, still apply. For example, like I know you designed the program for people who may be starting out with a lot of weight to lose. And if you have a lot of weight to lose, it's that much harder to deny hunger signals and to bounce in and out of restriction and feeding. So that's why iDiet was designed to keep your blood sugar stable and to keep the supply of calories while during the time that you're awake fairly level to control hunger so that you can stay in it and lose the weight initially. Because if you look at the people who are writing about, making videos about, talking about intermittent fasting, they all have abs already, right? They're the fitness experts, they're the health experts. They've gotten to their goal weight and they're looking for tweaks and ways to get even better or maintain it. They're metabolically at a different place than a lot of people who are really looking to start or double down on a significant weight loss. So
That's such a good point. I mean, I think modified fasting for somebody who's already thin is a totally different animal from someone who wants to lose 10, 20, 30 pounds or more.
yeah, yeah. So it's something to look at to help you stay in control once you're close to your goal. It'll be easier to do because you, as we teach in iDiet, your ability to respond to fullness signals gets better as you lose weight. Your ability to respond to hunger improves as you lose weight. So it's a lot easier to do intermittent fasting the closer you get to your goal. And the first thing I know that Dr. Roberts, you said this before, like if you want to try time restricted eating, just stop eating after dinner. Like just stop eating at night,
Mm.
and then you've increased your window of non-eating, and that's a beginning,
That's
right?
a
So
that's a total win-win. You know, anybody who wants to do that, great. Start tonight. It's a great thing.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so the last question we got by email that I know we really want to address is like, and it was prompted by an article in a Harvard health newsletter about bariatric surgery and its benefits in long-term health, which I read it, I thought it was very one-sided because it doesn't take a lot of other factors into account like complications and nutrient deficiency and other things. But so basically the question is, I keep hearing about bariatric surgery. I know people lose a lot of weight on it initially. What's our take on getting your stomach cut up?
Oh my. I mean, okay, so I think it's my mission in life to try and keep people away from the bariatric surgeons. I mean, if every person I keep out of their office, I feel like I've won something good. And we've had, as you know, Lee, we've had people who've lost more than 100 pounds with iDiet. So I don't think you have to think that you can lose 100 pounds with bariatric surgery or 10 pounds with a behavior program. I know it's very effective, and we really do have people who've done extraordinarily well. Um, I think bariatric surgery is problematic from all kinds of perspectives. You lose 90% of your stomach and quite a lot of your intestines. So you're a thoroughly changed person. You have malabsorption of a lot of nutrients that you need. We hear of lots of cases of micronutrient deficiencies. Some people, I mean, the saddest group of people I ever counsel are people who've done bariatric surgery, they've lost some weight, and then they have to come back into a behavioral program like iDiet because they started regaining weight. So they're doing the behavior program that could have perhaps saved them from losing their stomach in the first place.
Yes, we
So
have a
I would
fair number
say,
of people who join iDiet after having failed at bariatric surgery because they've stretched their stomach out again, or
yeah,
they were emotional eating, or they just never learned how to eat properly. And then they found it really hard to eat properly because they had dumping syndrome or regurgitation or all these other physical problems trying to eat healthy food after having had the surgery.
yeah, no, no. So I mean, please, if anyone's thinking of bariatric surgery, try iDiet first, and we will do our best to help you lose a lot of weight so that you don't need to go to the surgeons.
Yeah, it's very hard to maintain proper nutrition on the small amounts of food that you're limited
Yeah,
to eat. Um, it sets you up for some long term, and we're starting to see it with longitudinal studies. Like you try to lose weight in your 40s with it. What happens when you're 70? And, are there complications? Can you get enough of the proper nutrients? Are you still processing your food when you can't digest fats anymore because that part has been cut out? It's very worrying.
Yeah, no, it's a major thing. Nobody should do that as a first, second, or third choice, I think.
Yeah. So I hope we've addressed the bulk of the questions that we got. I saw a few hands raised, and I can't track all the hands raised. I'm sorry. If we left anything unanswered, please write me directly, lee@theidiet.com, and we'll get your question answered, because we may have missed a few. But thank you so much for being here. We have so many people participating. It's lovely to see you with us. I'm looking over to the side of the chats at all the names. It's amazing. So thank you for your time and your attention and your participation online. Remember that we have classes. We have a Tuesday night Engage and a Wednesday night Advance. Registration ends tomorrow, Sunday, if you're watching this live. If you're watching the recording, it might be too late, but write us and see. Then thank you, Dr. Roberts. This has been a really fun and educational conversation.
So it's my pleasure, and Lee, it's always a pleasure to have you ask questions. You're a great interviewer. So bye to everybody for now.
Oh, win, win, win again, right?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. And thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
We'll see you next time.